Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by Matt Moreno. Matt, you and I are here on a Saturday afternoon because the Dodgers did something, and something of significance. This isn't another Shelby Miller or sort of trade or acquisition around the edges. This is J.D. Martinez from the Red Sox signing a one-year, $10 million deal to become the Dodgers' designated hitter. Again, you know, in an offseason of everybody else making big moves, and of course Dansby Swanson signs with the Cubs today, the Dodgers do something of significance. I'm not saying it's enough. I'm not saying it's going to ease every concern everyone has had, but this feels substantial in a way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. You know, JD Martinez, obviously, he's had a little bit of inconsistency over the past few years, but historically has been a very good designated hitter. And so, you know, it's a noteworthy signing for the team and what's been, you know, relatively quiet offseason. Obviously, Clayton Kershaw re-signing notwithstanding, and, you know, no disrespect to Noah Syndergaard, Shelby Miller, and, you know, the two trades the Dodgers also made. But fans, we've been on here multiple times during the winter meetings. Fans were upset, you know, seeing all the shortstops go to other teams. And so to get somebody like JD Martinez, I think is definitely at least, you know, a step in the right direction.
Yeah, Martinez turning 35 in August. But this guy has been, for the past, you know, decade almost, one of the best hitters in Major League Baseball. You know, obviously coming off of a season that wasn't his best season, but weighted runs created plus of 119, so 19% better than average, which is nice. We'll get into the numbers. We'll get into some implications. I think that's one of the huge storylines. What does this mean for Justin Turner, Miguel Vargas? Let's pop this up here. Jonathan Montgomery threw a super comment. We appreciate that. Dodgers, again, continuing to win the 2015 offseason. This has kind of been a joking storyline throughout. They go get Shelby Miller, whose best years are behind him. J.D. Martinez, best years behind him. Jason Hayward, Noah Syndergaard. You kind of go down the list. A lot of guys. Now, this doesn't mean these guys are bad in 2022 and in 2023, but Jonathan is not without merit making a joke like this.
No, definitely not. And I mean, like I said, JD Martinez, I think, is somebody who still can be plenty productive for the Dodgers. The Noah Syndergaard stuff, you know, that I kind of get maybe some of the concern there a little bit more. But, you know, I think similar with Syndergaard signing with the Dodgers and the pitching coaches having a track record of helping players kind of turn, I don't want to say necessarily turn their careers around, but get back maybe on the right path. JD Martinez has a history with Robert Van Scoyoc, who obviously is the Dodgers hitting coach now. And so now he's going to be with him on an everyday basis. And, you know, hopefully that'll kind of help maybe some of the underlying stuff that has declined recently.
Yeah, let's look into those numbers here while we're talking about it. Last season, 16 home runs. That was his lowest, you know, not counting the 2020 season. That was 16 home runs was his lowest since 2013. Again, I mentioned weighted runs created plus 119, so 19% better than average. Excluding 2020, that was his lowest since 2013. But all that aside, a 119 weighted runs created plus is still very good. You look at some of the splits. The first half of the season, he was fantastic last year, had a batting average over 300. He had almost 40 extra base hits, 9 home runs and 30 doubles in the first half. The second half, the batting average dropped 70 points. The extra base hits cut in half. 7 home runs, just 13 doubles in the second half. And so what do you make of J.D. Martinez? I mean, he's 35, which sounds old, and yet it's not a guy you're asking to run around and play the outfield. He didn't play the field a lick last year, so if you're thinking he's going to play some left field, I can all but assure you that will not be the case. He's going to be the DH 95+% of the time. But what do you think about J.D. Martinez, the player, before we get into Justin Turner and all that kind of stuff?
He's somebody who I've always thought would fit. I mean, the Dodgers, I feel, have had interest in him for 5 years now, dating back to when he was still with the Tigers. And he's somebody who I always thought would fit well with them. Obviously, back then it was more of a potential, corner outfielder type, and now with the universal DH, it's for that role. I think. So I think it's a 1 year signing, right? And it's only $10 million. I mean, look, frankly, for 1 year, you could get me to buy in at just about any salary because, one, it's not my money, and two, it's only 1 year. Like, if it goes bad, then hey, it was just the one season. So there's that, and like I said, I think he can be a productive hitter for them, and I don't really see much downside to it. I know we're going to get into the implications and potential fallout for some of the other players on the roster, and a Justin Turner type. I'm not overly concerned. I'll save my more expanded comments later. But I will say what I am, though, is surprised because since the universal DH was implemented, the Dodgers have preferred to use it on a rotating basis. And maybe some of that was just a matter of circumstance and not having obviously a kind of a perennial DH on the roster and not necessarily being – I mean, they were interested in Nelson Cruz, I think, last offseason or 2 off seasons ago. So they've shown some signs of being willing to do that. But that's, I think, more than anything is I'm surprised that they are sort of committing to kind of one full-time DH.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. And I think I look at the roster, and that tells me they believe in the flexibility of the rest of the guys, Max Muncy, Chris Taylor, those types, to be able to move around enough to give you the roster flexibility, the lineup flexibility day in and day out with JD Martinez being your everyday designated hitter. It is funny, though, because I see lots of people complaining about how old JD Martinez is and the 2015, that kind of thing. I mean, keep in mind, Justin Turner is 3 full years older than JD Martinez. Now, what's interesting is looking at those two guys' numbers next to each other. They're almost identical in most categories. I mean, their OPS is just under 800, about the same for both guys. Turner's weighted runs created plus a tick higher. He had significantly less home runs than JD Martinez. I shouldn't say significantly. He had 13 home runs. JD Martinez had 16 home runs. So not significantly less. But I would bet on JD Martinez's power to come back more so than Justin Turner's. Just looking at those two guys, obviously Justin Turner provides you more defense. But if we're just looking at the bats, Turner just turned 38. JD Martinez a couple months removed from turning 35. If you had to choose between those two guys, just the bat, and I guess you could factor in anything else you want with Justin Turner, would you have preferred Justin Turner? And again, I'm not saying necessarily it excludes them, but under the assumption the Dodgers had to choose, who would you have preferred?
I think I still would probably take Justin Turner, and there's multiple factors to it for me. One, I think he gives you the ability to play defense.
Yeah.
2, I mean, it's similar, to the Clayton Kershaw thing where he's become a beloved figure not only within the franchise but the community as well, and I think that carries some weight. And it's not by any means we need to also remember Justin Turner isn't somebody who hit 100 last season, and your Dodgers would just potentially be keeping him around to keep him around.
He's good.
So I think I would still lean towards him, and I agree with you. I know we'll get into it shortly. I don't think that JD Martinez absolutely means that Justin Turner isn't back. It certainly is at least a little bit of a small roadblock to that path, but I think the Dodgers can still make it work.
So let's get into that, because I think that's probably, besides JD Martinez himself, the biggest storyline is what this means for Justin Turner. The reason that I would suggest and guess that Justin Turner is gone is just looking at the construction of the roster. JD Martinez, you can pencil him in to be your everyday designated hitter. Justin Turner, if he's not the designated hitter, would have to be playing third base. But when I look at the infield, you've got Miguel Vargas, you've got Gavin Lux, and you've got Max Muncy. That feels like your second base, shortstop, and third baseman pretty much penciled in. I posted on Twitter, the only pathway from my perspective of Justin Turner coming back is if you believe in Miguel Vargas' ability to play some left field. That feels like a massive stretch to me. But Matt, outside of Miguel Vargas playing left field, I don't see the path to Justin Turner being added into this roster as well.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. And if Justin Turner is still re-signed after this move, I think Miguel Vargas definitely is the biggest. I don't want biggest loser is a poor way of wording it, but He loses the most opportunities in this scenario, because if Justin Turner is back, then that probably means he's going to be playing more third base, obviously, than DH, which it was kind of flipped this past season. And if that is the case, then that's pushing Max Muncy to second base, which frankly I'm comfortable with. I'm somebody who believes that Muncy is better at second base than third base. I was surprised that the Dodgers aligned their defense with Muncy at third as much as they did this year. And then, of course, that pushes Gavin Lux to shortstop, which, tea leaves, it's been trending in that direction anyway. I don't necessarily believe in it, but hey, with JD Martinez, Justin Turner, Max Muncy, you can sell me on that. Yeah. So then I agree with you. Where does that lead? That kind of squeezes Miguel Vargas out of the picture, unless, like you said, all of a sudden he's going to take to left field, which was rocky for him. And, maybe with some off-season training and some work there in spring training, he can pick up on it better. But that is an interesting kind of domino effect.
Yeah, and not to mention, Justin Turner, by the way, almost assuredly going to cost more than the $10 million that JD Martinez got. And I think there's a decent likelihood he gets more than 1 year. Also, I would imagine he's hoping to get a 2-year deal. And some of the teams like the Marlins, I'm guessing there are teams out there that would give him 2 years and $24 million or even $22 million, at which case I wouldn't be all that interested. Because as you said, the other piece on Turner is they had started transitioning him out of playing defense last year. And so now to go back and say, actually, you're going to be our everyday third baseman, that seems crazy, and you're going to have to pay him like an everyday third baseman. And so I think it gets tricky if you're the Dodgers. And again, not to mention Justin Turner's 38 years old. And so I'll be curious to see how that one plays out. To me, this is a pretty clear indication that unless there's a real big discount or some crazy injury that happens before Justin Turner signs, then I just don't see the path forward, which leads me to the last question is, are the Dodgers done on the offensive side? This would seem to suggest that Chris Taylor is in the outfield. We talked about him possibly being shortstop, but it's kind of the same thing. Chris Taylor playing shortstop means Gavin Lux is playing second base, which means Miguel Vargas is playing ... Miguel Vargas is a much better option than Trayce Thompson and James Outman. That's my view. As far as guys that you would sort of want to place a bet on for this upcoming season. And so Vargas on the infield gives you Taylor in the outfield, plus one of the two question marks in Thompson or Outman or some combination of that group. So do you think there's still a move for an outfielder to be made here if you're the Dodgers, or do you think this kind of is what the sort of offensive position player side of the roster is going to look like?
No, I mean, I think you still need a center fielder, and there was a report from Ken Rosenthal saying, the Dodgers are looking at the trade market to kind of address that need. And I guess, JD Martinez is sort of insurance where you feel a little bit more comfortable going in with your current group than how it was looking up until today.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, I think you still need somebody to plug into center field because Chris Taylor, I mean, it seems like they want to be able to move him around, which I think is fine. And, I don't know if he would be the best answer in center field on an everyday basis. Just like you said, Trayce Thompson, I mean, you hope that he can, kind of correct his reverse splits and all that, but you still don't necessarily know. And I mean, we had the discussion this year, about, is he an everyday player? Does he deserve those everyday at bats? And his strikeout rate and all that was alarming. And so for me, I think you still, like I said, you still need a center fielder, but if, worst case scenario, this is kind of the group of position players you go in with, it is definitely, you're in a better position than you were, 3 hours ago.
Well, how about this? Is it possible that the trade for a center fielder that Ken Rosenthal has talked about, and he mentioned some names, Christian Pache of the A's, Victor Robles, I believe, of the Nationals, another name, a couple other younger guys that might be available. I mean, is it possible that Gavin Lux becomes the centerpiece for one of those trades, and then Chris Taylor's your shortstop, and you've got Trayce Thompson, James Outman, fill in the blank, sort of manning left field? That would seem to, because they're in this weird position of they've already got, it feels like 10 or 11 guys for like 8 spots, and yet 4 or 5 of them you don't feel great about. So how you just adding more to it, it's like, well, Outman needs some run and Vargas needs some run. So it feels like, I mean, what do you think? Is it possible that Gavin Lux becomes the centerpiece in a trade for a center fielder?
I mean, I guess you can't necessarily rule it out. That would be interesting, and it certainly does alleviate some of the depth chart issues that you would have. And I don't know how much Chris Taylor would be able to play shortstop on an everyday basis would be my concern if you do that. And if that's the direction you head down, then who's the backup to Chris Taylor? You need to, like, you have a bunch of outfielders. You don't have enough infielders to kind of cover that. I mean, unless
Jacob Amaya.
Yeah. But then is he going to be somebody you carry on your active roster at this point? Like, so that would be interesting to see if that is the path they end up going. And, I guess, Lux certainly has the pedigree of being a potential trade chip. He was, over recent years, and he's still a former top prospect. He's still really young, and maybe you can, kind of sell high if you need to address another area of the roster. Yeah,
it'll be interesting. But I know we see the roster and we're like, we don't love what's going on in center field. We don't love what's going on in left field. We probably don't love what's going on at shortstop. And even second base, if Miguel Vargas is your everyday second baseman, you might feel okay about it. Like, you might be optimistic about it, but we haven't seen Miguel Vargas do it. Until we do, it's hard to bet on it. And yet, as uncomfortable as you might be with second base, for example, you need to give Miguel Vargas enough of a runway to figure out if he is the long-term answer there or not. You need to give a guy like James Outman, who for the longest time was, as somebody in the chat said, not a guy that was a huge prospect, but there is some real belief I sense within the organization that there was a swing tweak and that some of the power that came this past year in the advanced hit tool is actually sustainable potentially. And so again, you might not love him getting 250, 300 at bats as your center fielder, but until he does, you'll never really know if he's a guy that you can bank on going forward. And so the Dodgers are in a unique spot where Vargas and Outman and, Pepio on the pitching side, a lot of these guys are sort of hitting that glass ceiling all at the same time. And so they've got to figure out what they're going to do with it. It'll be interesting. Real quick, Matt, do you want to share some thoughts on Dansby Swanson, your reaction to that 7-year, $177 million contract? If you want to share the text message that you sent to me. And then everyone, if you want to throw some comments or questions in the chat, we can get to a few questions here before we close the show. But Swanson, 7 years, $177 million with the Cubs. What was your thoughts?
Yeah, so basically, when we were on here last, kind of discussing shortstop options and the outlook, and Dansby hadn't signed yet, I admitted that under the right terms, you could talk me into it. And so then after seeing 7 years, $177 million, I told you guys in our staff thread, that's a number that I think I would have done. All things considered, the way the shortstop market has been going, it's more or less a bargain. At least that's how it looks now. And obviously now it's up to Dansby to sort of play to the expectations that he did this year and be a little bit more consistent than he's shown in his career. But had the Dodgers done that, I wouldn't have been, upset. And I think it's definitely a better deal than some of the, 11-year, 13-year contracts that the other shortstops received. And that's with, readily admitting that Trey Turner was my number one choice among that group in free agency.
Yeah, I kind of had the same reaction. I'm not saying I would have loved to pay Dansby Swanson 7 years and $177 million, but there was sort of a part of me that felt like I would hate that contract less than a lot of the other ones that we saw come off the board, just because it is 7 years. And I think as much as Swanson, we don't have to talk a ton because he's not going to sign with the Dodgers, but as much as I have real questions about what his ceiling is, I also felt like you kind of knew what you were getting with Swanson. And as long as he's an average to above average offensive shortstop with solid defense for 5 or 6 of those 7 years, I think you wouldn't hate yourself for signing that contract. Whereas I think Correa has a ton of injury concerns, and I think, Trey Turner and Xander Bogaerts, those contracts have a real possibility of a 4 or 5 year gap at the end of it that are really, really ugly. So we'll see. Let's get to some questions. THP asks, thoughts on a Max Kepler trade, Jeff? Baseball Savant loves him. Looks like he needs to hit the ball in the air more, which is what the Dodgers are perfect in helping guys do. Kepler's another one of those guys that I think makes a lot of sense for the Dodgers. You look at, like you said, Baseball Savant, literally everything is red. Hard hit percentage and barrel rate are the only two that are quote unquote below average, and they're 45th and 49th percentile. We're talking about an expected batting average of 80th percentile, strikeout rate 88th percentile, walk rate 84th percentile, defensively 97th percentile in outs above average. And so this is a guy that I think could be really compelling, 29 years old, has been playing right field. So is he a left fielder, and does that fit with what the Dodgers have? But I'm intrigued by Max Kepler. I think this is the type of guy, a former top prospect who, has some years of team control. I believe he's got a club option through 2024. So you get him for a couple years. I think he solves a problem, low AAV. This is the type of player, if not him specifically, it's a type of player that I'm very interested in.
Yeah, I agree. He's definitely an intriguing option. And right now it's more been speculation that the Twins might look to make a move because of just signing Joey Gallo, ironically enough. It would be kind of funny if the Twins signing Gallo leads to Max Kepler ending up on the Dodgers. I wouldn't necessarily count on it. I don't know what it may require to trade for him. I don't know if the Dodgers would sort of be willing to do. I think, Andrew Friedman has a history of trading prospects, but it kind of needs to be the right deal, and he's not going to necessarily overpay. Yeah.
And again, I think one of the hard parts is, he played 9 innings in center field last year. So it's kind of like center field is sort of the most important position of need. Now, if they go and get a left fielder, I'm not going to hate it because, I'm higher on Outman than I think most people are. I think Outman gives you solid defense. We know that for sure. I think Trace Thompson, I think all of those guys are above average defensively in center field. And so if you can go get a left fielder, I'll rephrase what I said. I want to go get the best outfielder I possibly can. It doesn't have to be a center fielder, I guess is where I land. But if all things were equal, you would much rather go get a sort of a premium guy at a premium position, for sure. Let's see. Easy asks, how realistic is a trade for Carlson or Alek Thomas, as Ken Rosenthal noted in his recent column? Yeah, Rosenthal's stuff on The Athletic is really good. Alek Thomas in the division, that one I would imagine is going to be really, really tricky. Carlson is sort of in the same boat, I believe, as Kepler, in that the Cardinals, if I'm not mistaken, have sort of a surplus in the outfield right now. That one feels way more likely than Alek Thomas. I just can't see the Diamondbacks trading with the Dodgers, but never say never. It is the Diamondbacks. It's not the Padres or the Giants. So it feels like there might be maybe a little bit more flexibility. Maybe they're still mad about the pool incident. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And Carlson is somebody that the Cardinals reportedly have already floated in trade talks when they were trying to get Sean Murphy from the A's. So I think there's a willingness from them to potentially trade him. And definitely it's more likely for that reason. And like you said, I just don't see the Dodgers and Diamondbacks really lining up on a trade.
Yeah, Carlson not a free agent until 2027, which is appealing there. Obviously, a guy who has has a little bit of a career and played a bunch of center field. That's one advantage he's got. So he played some center field as well. Just looking up his numbers from last year, he's a 2.5 wins above replacement player each of the last 2 years. League average offensively, but playing some center field. So there we go. Ederico says Dodgers right now to me look like just a playoff team. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of people that seem to think they're worse than a playoff team, so I agree with you, Ederico. Do I think the Dodgers, as constructed, are better on paper than the Padres? No. But do I think they're dramatically better than the Giants and everybody else in the division? Definitely yes. So I think the Dodgers are yes, absolutely a playoff team, just a playoff team. We could different interpretations of that phrase.
Yeah, I mean, I get the sentiment, and I've expressed my concerns with the roster and kind of the direction of the front office has taken this offseason, and how it appears pretty obvious that they're trying to avoid the luxury tax threshold and the implications from that, and still needing to address multiple needs. I still think yes, you want more talent than not. You want to have the best players on your team, but as we saw this year and other seasons, that doesn't guarantee anything. And so the Dodgers could have a team that maybe doesn't look as talented on paper, but it's the one that for whatever reason ends up winning the World Series. You just never know.
Yeah, I agree. Couple more real quick. David says, are we sure JD Martinez can't play the outfield? He played 0 innings in the field last year. So obviously I do not know whether or not he's capable. He has never been a plus defender, and so he is 35. He played 0 innings last year. I'm just reading between the lines on that one. The real RL7 says, will Trace Thompson be in the opening day lineup? Matt, yes or no? Trace Thompson opening day lineup?
No, not anymore.
Okay, so who do you have? Just out of curiosity, I'll push here. Give me your so Will Smith behind the plate, Freddie Freeman, Vargas at second, Lux at short, Muncy at third, JD at DH, Mookie at right. Or do you have? Yeah, I mean, I would go with that group. I will say, give me Outman in center and Chris Taylor in left field. That would be my group.
That's safe. That's if I absolutely needed to pick the safest bet. That's the one I would go with. But I'll throw a little bit of curveball. I'll say Justin Turner at third base, Max Muncy at second, Gavin Lux shortstop,
Vargas in left?
Vargas left field, and then Chris Taylor in center field.
Okay, there you go. Just to be different. We appreciate that. We appreciate that. Well, that'll do it for us, folks. We appreciate you all joining us on this quick one. Again, Dodger Heads, breaking news. JD Martinez signing with the Dodgers. Had to hop on here. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Ring the notification bell. A lot of times when something like this happens, we're just going to hop on as quickly as we can. If you've got notifications turned on, you will get a notice saying, hey, Dodger Heads. We try and schedule them 10, 15 minutes at least in advance to say, hey, Dodger Heads is going to be live in 15 minutes. Make sure you get there talking JD Martinez, talking Noah Syndergaard, talking, Carlos Correa signing elsewhere, all those type of things. So make sure you've got the notifications bell rung as well. If you're a podcast person, a lot of this content is put on our podcast feed as well. So you can check out Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever, Spotify. Search Dodger Heads. We're part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. You can check that out as well. And then Matt and I will be back on here tomorrow night. Jeez Louise, it's Saturday. We'll be back on doing a Sunday show. That's normally our spot during the season. Obviously, during these winter months, it's kind of hit or miss. But we'll be back this Sunday. That's usually in the 7 to 8 p.m.-ish range. So stay tuned for that. We'll have it'll be posted on YouTube, so you can check that out as well. We appreciate all of you guys joining us. Again, Matt, thanks for hopping on as well. Enjoy the rest of your night, everyone. And of course, as always, go Dodgers.